How you guys doing? Welcome aboard the next video. Now today we're going to be talking about the Drakan series, its developer, and maybe answering the question, could there ever be a third one in the series? So let's go ahead and get started.
Press start.
Fatality.
Hadouken! It's me, Mario! Here we go!
So the first game in the series was developed by Surreal Software and published by Psygnosis on July 14th, 1999. However, this game was only available on the PC. Now, Surreal Software is also known for games such as the Suffering series, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and This Is Vegas, but that game never came out. We will get to that. Now, Drakan was created using the Riot engine, which was an engine that Surreal Software actually created. And with this engine, they created their very first game, Drakan Order of the Flame. Now, I do have a copy of this game for the PC. It's the only one I have, the only PC game I have complete in box. And if you'll notice on the back of my version, it's actually German. So if I ever do a run through on this game, I'll end up having to translate quite a bit of what's going on. My German's a little rusty, so it would take me a little bit to figure out how to translate certain things, but that would be pretty interesting and definitely a video to do at a different time. Now let's go ahead and start talking about where it all started with Surreal Software. They began in the year 1995. Started by 4 college graduates who felt they had nothing to lose. Each of the 4 graduates had 4 key skills to be able to offer for this company that they were starting. Art, programming, design, and business. These were the 4 key things that these 4 individuals had at their benefit to be able to create what is Surreal Software, or what was Surreal Software. Now, the reason why all 4 of these individuals decided to go along with this and create this business was because they had all 4 a great passion for the video gaming industry and video games in itself. They all felt they knew what it took to make a really great video game. The lead designer of the company was Alan Patmore. The lead programmer was Stuart Denman. The businessman was Nick Radovic. And the creative designer was Mike Nichols. Now, Mike Nichols actually had some prior experience in the video gaming industry, so he already had some of the contacts within the video gaming industry to be able to get noticed. The only thing that they had to do was create a very great first game in order to get their foot in the door. So the first task that they had to complete was to create some sort of technological foundation that they could actually stand on, while also creating concept artwork to be able to sell to publishers. So that way they could get funding to create their very first game. Now obviously they got the funding, so the first thing of course that they would do was hire more people. Stuart Denman and his people actually ended up developing the Riot engine for their company, at the same time retaining the rights to their own engine as well. This allowed 3 things to be able to take place. For instance, if a publisher decided to back out of the game and cancel it entirely, they actually had something to fall back on. On the second hand, they could also license out their technology to other companies. And on the third hand, they could actually work on multiple titles since they already owned the engine and its rights. Now, during their time of upbringing in the mid to late 90s, they actually were competing against developers who were trying to make games that were a lot like Doom. So what they ended up doing was trying to come up with concepts that would get away from the Doom feel of gaming. They wanted something that was like Doom, but a little more different. So after a while of making many different concept arts and showing it off to different publishers, they finally got one to back them, and that was Virgin Interactive Entertainment in 1996. Now at that point in time, the concept of Drakan was very much different than what we got today. The original concept was a Drakan RTS, or real-time strategy game. The dragon would basically fly around the game and take over villages by force and make the villagers do whatever it wanted to do. However, Virgin Interactive Entertainment wanted to fill a slot for arcade shooting that was missing within their titles that they had working on in their books. This led the developers into creating a fast-paced third-person dragon flying game. Man, that is a mouthful. So in early 1997, Virgin Interactive Entertainment actually started cutting off many of their projects because, well, they started going under. So Surreal Software ended up selling their Drakan concept to Psygnosis, and on the upside, Psygnosis gave them full reign to be as creative and as well designing as they wanted to be. So the team decided to actually go for a more RPG feel. So they tried to make a role-playing game, but the problem that they ran into was that a dragon, being the main character, would have very little to be able to carry in its inventory and would have very little to do with interactions amongst NPCs or non-playable characters within the game. A good example of what that would have been like is Dragon Rage in 2001. Now, this game is absolutely terrible and it shouldn't be compared to Drakan, but the reason why I'm bringing this one up is to actually showcase what exactly I mean by they saw that a main character being a dragon was not a good idea. And this game is a good example of that. In this game it shows how little interaction you can have with the world around you. Now that concept alone makes a terrible game, so that's why this is actually a good example of how they foresaw this being a problem, so they immediately worked on trying to fix it. The reason why the decision was made to create a female main character was so that way they have someone with a personality that can create a balance with the immense size and power of a dragon. I'll show you something so you understand what I'm saying.
Listen here, you wretched reptile! That's the life of my brother you're talking about!
Very well, Rin. I will listen.
Yes, but will you help me, Era?
I do not have much choice. You brought my soul crystal. If you choose to bond with me, it will be done.
I don't know about you, but that actually seems like a really good balance. That was very well done, and a very good conceptual idea that they actually put in place. They did obtain a much higher budget when they got Psygnosis to sign on with their project. This allowed them to actually increase their team size and also be able to increase their game size as well with the content within this game. Now in 1998 at E3, this game was revealed to the public, and press actually started to call this game highly ambitious, and many people could not wait to see what this game is going to be fully capable of upon its release. Now they did end up being 6 months late in their release, releasing on July 14th, 1999, when the original release schedule was supposed to be February of 1999. Now the reasoning why the pushback is because they had to take certain amounts of people and actually create demos. And each demo would take a couple of weeks to do. And these demos would be a wide range of things, from showcasing it at conventions, or making demos on discs that they would put in magazines, or even downloadable ones on the internet. Now just so you kids out there know, that weren't around the time period that I played games, and many of the viewers that you probably already know this as well, but back in those days, demos you could find them in magazines. You'd purchase a magazine and they would be in there on a disc, and that was a really cool time in gaming because a disc could hold up to like 8 different games and the demos for each one. Now in March of 1998 they decided to focus more on their best 10 levels out of the original 14. They also started cutting out content that didn't seem to have strong gameplay, such as the dart gun and the boomerang. Now despite the issues the team had during the whole entire process, since this was their first game, it was an entirely new learning process for them, the game was still a huge success, selling very well and getting awards upon awards just for their creativity and bringing something new to the table. Now some people will be like, well, Drakan didn't really bring anything new. Now that's not exactly true. The very first Drakan game actually did bring something new to the table. It was the second one because a few years later, at that point in time, people were basically copying the style of the first Drakan game. Now, it was at this time that Psygnosis realized that they had a huge hit on their hands, and this was just prior to their release of the first game. So then they decided immediately to start working on a second one. So now we come to Drakan the Ancient's Gates on the PS2. Now, they started working on a sequel just before they started shipping out the first game. New people were also hired on during this time to be able to help out with this new project. During the same time, Surreal Software was starting to go from PC over to PS2 game making. The other problem that they had was they needed to be able to go into a new tier of console and be able to get new fans who had never heard of the Drakan series to be able to be fans of the game. I was actually one of these people. I never heard about the first one until I saw the second one on the PS2. Didn't even know that it was a sequel. Purchased it, played it, loved it. Came to find out that it was a sequel. That is how well they made this game, to where it continued off the storyline from the first one. And then you can actually sit here and play this one. Whether you played the first one or not, you can instantly understand what is going on, what needs to be done, what the goals are. And if you played the first one and go into the second one, you're not disappointed either. It actually picks up where the first one left off. Absolutely phenomenal. The downside of that, for people such as me that go back and explore it, to play the first game, the very beginning of the second game kind of spoils the ending of the first game. But what else could you do? I mean, you're moving from PC to PS2, and there's a reason for that. Something I should also mention before I continue on as to why they switched from PC to PS2 is also that Drakan the Ancient's Gates is a PS2 exclusive. So after the team figured out the direction that they were going to take for the sequel, Psygnosis, who was owned by Sony, closed their US offices and completely merged with the Sony Computer Entertainment Europe part of their company. And at that same time, they were getting out of publishing games on the PC and going strictly over to PlayStation. And there's the reason why Surreal Software switched from PC to PS2. Now, due to that switch between consoles, it actually made Surreal Software push back their delivery date by a whole year. Now, at the same time, Surreal Software switched publishers to Sony Computer Entertainment USA, so that way their developer was actually in the same time zone. And at the same time, their publisher understood the transition that they were going through and were working with them. So this was fantastic for Surreal Software. Now, the reason for the pushback is because they had to wait for the technology to arrive. Once the technology actually finally did arrive, they pushed very quickly and very hard to get a demo out for the 2001 E3 show. 2 months later at E3, people were astounded by their second game. Now, at this point in time, Surreal Software were really going into a crunch time trying to get this game out for Christmas holidays. And finally, on January 22nd, 2002, it was released. Also that same year, Surreal Software ported a game called Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring over to the PS2 and Microsoft. A game which was developed by WXP Games. So what happened next? Well, Surreal Software was acquired by Midway Games in April of 2004. Surreal then took on a new project that was known as the Suffering series, releasing the first one in 2004, and it was a major success, selling over 1.5 million units. Then they released the second one in 2005, and this was a major mistake. This costed them a $29.5 million loss in revenue. In 2006, to be able to make up for it, Surreal Software actually put out a job listings for artists to work on a new upcoming game on the PS3 and Xbox 360, which didn't have a title at the time. In February of 2008, Surreal's publisher Midway actually released screenshot footage of the game known as This Is Vegas, but disaster struck shortly after. In 2009, Midway actually filed bankruptcy and sold most of its assets, including Surreal Software, to Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment. And that was where the Surreal Software name was retired. So then the question remains, could a third Drakan game actually be possible? Could it ever happen? And if so, who has the rights in order to do so? Well, I did a lot of digging. and I did find out something very interesting. The 10 Bill of Rights for Game Developers, which is also based off of the 10 Bill of Rights for comic book creators, which these are actual rights protecting game developers from publishers. The first bill ensures the developer full rights and ownership to what they create, which means the last developer to have purchased Surreal Software and absorbed it, Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, owns the rights to the Drakan series. So could there be another Drakan game? That is highly unlikely, but not impossible. Maybe one day they'll want to make a game that's a lot like it. That would be more possible than creating a sequel. Creating a game that was a lot like the Drakan series in the modern game community would actually be more of a likely thing to happen. But only time will tell if this ever happens. So that wraps up this history in retro gaming. Now, the next video that I plan to do for retro history is THQ, and I'd also like to talk about Midway. So I'm going to do my research and come up with another video for those. As always, if you like this video, go ahead and click that like button down below. And remember 22 and stay classy, bros.
Continue.